Now you have built this beautiful embedded analytics experience, but your users in Germany see something weird. Their dates are in the wrong format, numbers look weird, and half of their UI is still in English. Not a pleasing experience. Here's the thing, if you're building for a global audience, localization isn't optional, but most of these analytics tools make it painful. And you end up hacking together workarounds and making separate dashboards and making life difficult for your users. ThoughtSpot actually makes this pretty straightforward. You can set the locale directly in the SDK with just one property. Language, date format, number format, currency, all handled at once. ThoughtSpot supports over 20 locales out of the box, and if you need to translate these column names and descriptions, you can upload these translation files. ThoughtSpot will dynamically show the right labels based upon each user's preference. In this video, we're going to talk about localization in ThoughtSpot. How can you make life of users across the world easier with localization, and how can you customize these formats for different regions? If you're new to this channel, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more ThoughtSpot related content.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for joining us today. I know we have a fairly small attendance for this session, but I think it's a very important session. It's something that we see a lot here at ThoughtSpot, at least lately, around localization of the content that you're embedding into your applications. So my name is Ron Duggar. I work on our embedded solution engineering team here at ThoughtSpot. We've got a group of super smart people here that have been working in this space for a long time. And our job is really to help our customers and partners like yourselves work through some of the technical questions that you may have about embedding ThoughtSpot into applications and then making that available to all of your end users. So that's really the purpose of my team. Today's session, again, is about ThoughtSpot localization, adapting analytics for global teams. I'm here stateside, but we still see fairly often a number of web applications that have global coverage. And I want to make sure that in this session that we all have at least a better understanding of what features are available today in ThoughtSpot. And then I'm also going to cover a few new features in ThoughtSpot, and just know that, translations, locales, localization, just in general, is a key topic here at ThoughtSpot. And there's a lot of discussions kind of going on behind the scenes around how we can make this more scalable and easier for all of you guys to make analytics available to your users that speak different languages. So our agenda today is really pretty short. I've got a little bit of terminology I want to kind of walk through with you. There's not a lot to it, but I want to make sure that we all are set on the definitions of what we're talking about today. I'll hit on a few of the features that we have built into the platform. I'll walk you through a demo of kind of just one use case, one solution for providing analytics to a global audience, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A. And then throughout this discussion, feel free to put any of your questions into the chat. Arsh will prompt me if something important comes up and we're on a specific slide, we'll address it right then. All right, any questions before we get started? Perfect. All right. So let's level set real quick on the definitions that we're going to be talking about today, because I see these definitions tossed around quite a bit. People talk about localization, people talk about locales, people talk about translations. I separate these out into three completely different topics. Locale is a setting. So locale is going to be the setting that you would select in ThoughtSpot. Typically, if you're logging into the front door of ThoughtSpot, you're going to set the locale directly in the user profile. So if I've got a ThoughtSpot cluster open here, I think you guys can see the screen, correct? Or so you can see ThoughtSpot, great. So if I click on my name here and go to profile, and I'm in, let me actually refresh this page here. Primary org, and I can set my profile to whatever language, my locale to whatever language that I want here, right? So I'm going to set this back to English United States. And this is going to, what this does is it determines what's going to be shown in the UI of ThoughtSpot. So dates may be interpreted a different way depending on what that locale is. The thousandth separator in numbers. There's a lot of things that locale in the profile will change in the ThoughtSpot UI. The second is the translations in the data. So that's really the second topic. And this one is not controlled by ThoughtSpot. This is going to be controlled by some solution, some functionality that you build into your product offering. So there's a lot of ways that we can implement different translations within those visuals that are being rendered within your web application. So we'll talk a bit about that. And then finally, localization. This is really the overarching topic of adapting your software, your web application to specific languages. So it's not just one thing. It's not just the locale, it's the translations, it's maybe images that you may have on your web page, depending on where that user is from. You may want to serve up different type of images and things like that. So it's a much bigger thing, localization is. So let's touch on locale a little bit deeper. I want to make sure that we all understand how locale is used in ThoughtSpot. And I assume that you're joining this AMA because you're interested in ThoughtSpot embedded. So this is going to be important to you. So the user profile, I showed you that. This is really the default. So ThoughtSpot's going to default to whatever locale you set in your user profile. Okay. And then in your user profile, I didn't show you this in the UI, but you also had the ability to choose to set that to whatever the browser is set to. So that's the second one. Whatever you have on either set on your machine or for your, however you browse the internet, that's what we're going to use for the locale for anything rendered in ThoughtSpot. And then finally, if you're embedding ThoughtSpot and you're using the SDK, which we always encourage you to do, you're able to pass a locale parameter directly in the instantiation of the SDK. So you can set it to a number of different languages just based on your requirements. So those are really the kind of the locale order of operations, user profile, then we go by browser, and then whatever you set in the SDK is going to take precedence over either of those first two. All right, now there's a few concepts I want to go over with you as far as, TSE, so embedding localization. Generally speaking, you're going to at least work with these three concepts if you're creating if you have a global web application and you're wanting to localize the content. The first is the SDK. So we mentioned this earlier. You're able to set that using the SDK by passing the locale parameter. You can see in that example, I'm passing FRFR, which is French. We have a number of locales that we can use within the SDK, and I'll provide links to that. And then the second is column aliasing. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with that. It's a fairly newer concept that is V1 is available now in your cluster. We're working on a new version of this that gives you the ability, and that's what that snippet is to the right of column aliasing. You can see where you have, it's just a CSV file where you can set the column name, the locale you want that column translated to, the org name, the group name, an alias, and then any description. So it's just a CSV file, and that's the V2 version of column aliasing. And we can apply that CSV directly to a model in ThoughtSpot. And when you set the locale via the SDK, it's going to take however you translate those column headers, it's going to render that the same way in ThoughtSpot. So if you have a column called region and you set the locale to ESES, which is Spanish, it's going to translate that appropriately to the Spanish dialect. Okay, and you can do this for as many columns as you have in your data. And the benefit of that is, again, any content that you build on that model and set the locale, all of those columns are going to be properly translated. And then the third is the data translation side of it. So there's a lot of things that we can do on the data. Again, this is outside of ThoughtSpot, but we can do a lot of things in ThoughtSpot to help support multiple languages. Some of the things that we see are just having completely separate databases depending on language. There are third-party tools out there that can do translations kind of on the fly. There are real-time. A lot of the CDWs today, like Snowflake, for example, there's Cortex AI built into it, so you can do those translations directly in the fly in ThoughtSpot. There's SQL pass-through, so we can hit some of those different functions in the CDWs to translate data. There's a lot of different things that we can do to translate the data. Okay, so those are the top three. There's one that I also want to mention, and I'll walk through this in a demo, is a new feature that's coming out beginning of next year. It's called publishing with variables in ThoughtSpot. So we have this ability now to create content at the primary org level, and then we can create variables in the tables that are built in that connection. and point that to different maybe tables within a database, different schemas within a database, or maybe in a database altogether. So there's a lot of things that we can do with publishing that maybe open the door to you to some additional functionality as far as providing a fully localized solution with ThoughtSpot. Any questions so far, Arsh? Anyone from the audience?
No, I think it's all good. No questions
Okay.
as of now.
So no questions right now. I do want to walk through a quick demo of some of these concepts and a potential solution of how we can provide a mostly fully translated localized version of an embedded application. I just want to walk through all these concepts with you. So let me go back into ThoughtSpot and we're going to walk through some of this together. So this is the primary org in this cluster. And you can see that I've got like any typical ThoughtSpot cluster, you're going to have connections, you'll have tables in those connections, and then you're going to build models from those tables. The libraries that you create will then connect to those models. So all those work together to create the full path from the data to insights. So if I go into my connections here, you can see that I've got this RAD Superstore. Actually, let me go back into my connections. I've got this RAD Superstore connection, and then within that connection, I've got an orders table. And I want to show you just really quickly kind of how publishing with variables will work, just from a visual standpoint. If I edit the TML on this table, you're going to see that my database table parameter within that TML file has a variable in it, this RAD underscore orders. And so what I've done in ThoughtSpot is you can go into, and I'll show you this really quickly. If I go into the REST playground, and you should see this on your cluster as well, we have this variable section. So you can go in and create variables. And these variables can be created for connection properties, for table mapping properties, property per principle, and then also formula variables. I haven't worked with the formula variables yet, so I need to do a little bit more research on that, but just know these are the 4 options that you have available for you. And what I've done with that RAD orders variable that I've created, I made that a table mapping. And if we look at my Snowflake, I'm logged into Snowflake here, I've created a database and a schema, and I've also created tables within that schema for different things. I've got RAD Superstore orders table, and this is the full set of data. This is my English version of the data. I've also created a dev table, so orders dev. This is just a subset of the data. So if I'm in a development environment, I may not want to look at all 100 million rows of data in that table. I may only want to look at 10,000 records just to make things nice and snappy as I'm developing content. And then I've also got a couple of other tables that I'm using here. One is this orders ES. So this is a Spanish version of the orders table, and I've got a French version of the orders table. And you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm just using the Cortex translate functions here to take whatever attributes that I have in the data, and I'm translating that into whatever locale it is that I want to translate it into. And for this example, I'm translating from English to Spanish. If I scroll down, you'll see that I'm also creating the French version as well. So translate those values from English to French. So that's just some of the advancements of AI and these CDWs that make translating things a little bit easier. I would definitely be interested to hear if you guys have used these before. To me, they're very simple. It makes it very easy to go to market very quickly with a fully localized translated version of that table. All right, back into ThoughtSpot. So now we have an understanding of, I've got a variable that I've created in ThoughtSpot. I've set those values to those variables in ThoughtSpot that point to specific orgs. So I've got an org in my cluster for each one of those use cases. So I've got RAD ES, so this is my Spanish org. And if I go into my Spanish org, you can see that I've got this RAD Superstore live board. So that live board is built on the published content that I've created in my primary and just made it available to those additional orgs. And you can see I have the data here, 725,000 for a specific region here. And the data is being translated appropriately because I am calling the correct table, the Spanish translated version of that orders table. Okay. Now, one thing that you don't see translated is the column headers. So this is where column aliasing comes in. So if I go back into the developer playground and let me go into, let me embed that live board. And we'll see the exact same experience. Those column headers are still not translated. But if we pass in the locale parameter here, and let's set that to Spanish. Yeah, now we've got those column headers are now being translated appropriately based on how we define those in the CSV file that we've uploaded to the model, okay? And so I can show you this exact experience if we were to go into my French org. Let's do the same thing here, go into the playground. Let's embed the same live board, and let's pass in the French locale. And you'll see the same thing, right? So the column headers are being translated appropriately. All the data is being translated appropriately because that variable at runtime is pointing to the French table that I have in Snowflake. Okay, so that makes this process so much more simple. So I do want to show you really quickly how we upload that translation to the model. Let me go back into my primary org here. And there's my Rat Superstore model. So the CSV file, I showed you just a snippet of what that looks like. This is all documented on our website. Just look up ThoughtSpot column aliasing. You'll see exactly how we need to create it. And then once you create the CSV, there's a specific format for it. You go into the model and you just upload that translation file, okay? And then how you use it is that this is only available for embedding. So you have to be either in the playground or in your web app. And you pass in the locale for that specific language that you're trying to translate it into. And that's what will use those translations from the CSV. One other thing I want to show you too. So the dev environment, again, this is rad dev. If I open that exact same live board, you can see that we're only looking at a subset of that data. So again, this is just kind of showing you the power of publishing with variables, how you can take one live board that's on the primary org and then publish that same live board directly to any other suborgs and then substitute in parameters for different tables, different connection properties, whatever that may be. So it's going to make scaling this a lot better, a lot easier. All right, let me go back to our presentation here. That's just a quick demo of how, this is just one possible solution for how you can create a translated, fully translated and localized version of a live board to different audiences. Maybe you don't separate out your users based on their language. Maybe you do. But just know that there's a lot of these features that we're building into ThoughtSpot they're coming out regularly, and we're building upon these. So that column aliasing feature that I talked to you about, version 1 of that is available now. We've got version 2 that's coming out within the next release or two that will give you the ability to tie that into a specific org or a group of users. So this is going to allow us to even further customize how we want to localize that embedded offering that you're creating for your end users. All right, so that's it from a demo standpoint. I've got a quick recap for you. The localization, let's just all understand that it's a process. It's not just one thing that you do in ThoughtSpot. It's the locale, the UI elements. It could be the translations and how do you access the data in a translated way. There's multiple ways that we can do that. Full localization will require a combination of features either inside ThoughtSpot or outside of ThoughtSpot. So we talked about column aliasing, and that's going to be a very powerful feature for you if this is something interesting to you. The data translation tools that are available in the market. Again, I like using the new AI functionality of some of these databases, the cloud data warehouses, just to make the translation happen on the fly. Is very powerful. You can set the locale dynamically with the SDK. And there's also custom CSS. So one of the things that I have found through this testing is that the answer titles that when you're embedding a live board into a page and you're wanting to fully localize it, each one of those answers has a title to it. So we don't currently have a way that you can dynamically change those titles into a certain locale, but there are solutions around how we can make that work. But we also have other projects that'll make that much more easy and scalable that are going on right now as well. Yeah, custom CSS, of course, is going to be extremely important for anybody who's embedding ThoughtSpot in a lot of different ways.
That was it for this particular video. I hope you understood something more about localization today. We are coming up with many more videos on this channel. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to this channel for more such amazing content coming ahead. This was all for this particular video, and see you in another one.